Just listen to this emotional breakdown. There's been a tectonic shift in United States politics. The government has officially enshrined the existence of only two genders, male and female. But let's leave the sensitive topic of gender identity aside for now. What's far more interesting is how this move has been received in a society where, seemingly, everyone knows how tariffs work. Or do they? The well-known businessman Mark Cuban, who made his name in the world of big money, has lashed out at Donald Trump, accusing him of soaring gas prices. This isn't just a political statement. It's a personal insult, a low blow. Cuban doesn't mince words, calling Trump dishonest and unethical. What's the reason for such fury? Cuban claims it's about ethics, or rather, the lack thereof. He points to Trump's questionable practices in business, citing the lawsuits surrounding Trump University and the scandalous Trump Soho project as examples. According to Cuban, Trump's history in business is irrefutable proof of his dishonesty. But why does this matter? Because, as Cuban says, many turn a blind eye to moral principles, justifying Trump's actions with his political views. I don't care, he's my... This is an argument that makes you think about the price of political loyalty. Are we willing to ignore ethical norms to achieve political goals? The question remains open. Friends, do you know that character is destiny? Just imagine this political circus called the U.S. presidency. No one knows what awaits around the next corner. The past is just dust under our feet, not a crystal ball. And in this moment of chaos and uncertainty, you need a person with an unbending character, a heart full of compassion, ready to learn and understand, and, most importantly, honest to the core to make those difficult decisions. How about this twist? It's impossible to even imagine how anyone could consider Donald Trump's candidacy with his blatant deficit of character and morality. Let's move on. Gas prices aren't just an annoying inconvenience, but a real headache for ordinary Americans. Mark Cuban has torn Trump's energy policy to shreds, accusing him not just of miscalculations, but of deliberately harming the country's economy. Just think about it. Trump's decisions in the energy market, according to Cuban, were the last straw that sent gasoline prices skyrocketing. The administration is in a panic. Folks, this accusation is like a bolt from the blue, especially considering it comes from someone who knows a thing or two about numbers and strategies. Cuban isn't just an armchair critic, but a real magnate who has built his own empire. He's known for his directness and fearlessness, whether it's on Shark Tank or in his business ventures. He's famous for being able to cut through the veil of lies and hypocrisy. And when someone like Cuban declares that Trump's decisions are detrimental to the country, people don't just listen, they heed his words. After all, his words are backed by experience, knowledge, and an unshakable reputation. Friends, get ready. We're not just witnessing a clash between two billionaires, Mark Cuban and Donald Trump. No, this is a battle for the soul of the nation, a question of who deserves to lead. Cuban is tearing Trump to shreds, exposing the very essence of his leadership. And that's where the main question arises. Are you sure the country can withstand another 4 years of such rule? Just imagine this man, claiming to be a great economist, has no idea how tariffs work. He naively believes that China will pay his crazy 60% duties. It's just a political circus. This is the same person who once believed that Mexico would finance the construction of the wall. No comment. How about this twist? Cuban's accusations aren't just digging into the past. They're a direct reflection of what happened just yesterday. The very first day after Trump's return to the White House turned into complete chaos. The administration is in a panic. The country is in shock. Without batting an eye, he signed decrees that shook the entire society. His decision to recognize only two genders, male and female, caused a storm of outrage. Trump's supporters rejoice, declaring a return to traditional values. But critics, including Cuban, are sounding the alarm. How can you ignore the complexity and diversity of gender identity in the modern world? Trump, as always, tries to present this as a restoration of common sense. But fewer and fewer people believe him. And here we return to the question of leadership, trust, and who really deserves to make decisions that determine the fate of an entire country. Friends, Just look at what's happening in this political circus. Mark Cuban is tearing Trump's policies to shreds, and it's not just about specific decisions, but about the very approach. According to Cuban, Trump's actions don't unite, but divide the society he's supposed to lead. Imagine, instead of being the leader of the nation, he becomes its divider. And how about this twist? Trump, true to form, is again declaring his intention to close the borders. And this time, it seems, he's ready to go all the way, creating obstacles even for legal crossings. His supporters rejoice, seeing this as strengthening national security. But business leaders, like Cuban, are sounding the alarm, foreseeing an economic catastrophe. After all, industries such as agriculture and construction rely on the labor of immigrants. Closing the borders is a direct path to labor shortages and economic collapse. Cuban is sure, Trump, as always, will only listen to himself. We've already seen this in the debates, right? He quips, if a person isn't willing to listen to anyone, even when trying to convince people to vote for him, then what plan can we talk about? I have concepts of a plan, says Cuban, but I'm not the president right now. And then, just shock. 40 or 44 cabinet members renounce him, former Republican presidents, senators, all shouting in unison, don't vote for him. Cuban can't come to terms with the fact that Trump is demanding that he betray his oath to defend the Constitution. This is not a man of honor, he declares. He would have been given a chance if they believed in his ethics, character, or honesty. The administration is in a panic. Folks, Cuban is sure that Trump isn't making any effort to learn anything. He's one of the few people on the planet who are getting dumber before our very eyes every day, he concludes. That's it, folks, without embellishment or euphemism. Friends, just look at this political circus. How drastically different are the opinions about this triumphant return of Trump? Some rejoice, anticipating the arrival of a strong hand capable of tearing all enemies to shreds. But Mark Cuban, like a voice crying in the wilderness, boldly declares, Trump's leadership style is chaos, pure chaos, and there can be no real progress. And remember how during the elections Cuban, sparing no effort, rooted for Kamala Harris, dreaming of burying Trump's political ambitions? But, alas, Trump came out unscathed, leaving Cuban and his like-minded people in a state of deep disappointment and anxiety. The country is split in two. Some are celebrating with a feast, welcoming decisive actions, while others are in horror preparing for the inevitable consequences. And here Cuban, like a fascinated rabbit before a boa constrictor, watches all this madness, tormented by doubts. Are these bold moves of Trump the result of a brilliant calculation or just a cheap play for the public? After all, we're not talking about some political games, but about the fate of America, about our future. And how about this twist, friends? Cuban says with bitterness, I don't think he pays attention to detail, and you can't be the president of the United States if you don't pay attention to detail. And you can't argue with that. It's great to shake the air with loud speeches, but when it comes to such a delicate matter as tariffs or foreign policy, the administration seems to be in a panic, because Trump, according to Cuban, doesn't realize the consequences and is literally going to ruin who knows how many small businesses. He's like a self-taught surgeon grabbing a machete when he needs the finest scalpel. So, friends, Trump is back, and a real political circus has begun. From gender battles to tightening border controls, the very first day of his triumphant return to office caused a storm of indignation and delight. But, just imagine all these scandalous decisions are just the tip of the iceberg. Mark Cuban, known for his directness, has lashed out at Trump with deafening criticism. And it's not just about politics. The main sticking point is Trump's trade policy, especially his game with imports from China. Cuban, as a staunch defender of a sound economy, never remains silent when he sees outright stupidity, and, in his opinion, Trump's trade strategy is a prime example. He argues that Trump simply doesn't understand how trade works and what impact it has on the country's economy. And how about this twist? During his previous term, Trump sharply increased tariffs, which led to a mind-boggling 60% jump in prices on imported goods from China. Cuban is sure that this step turned into a real catastrophe, inflicting a crushing blow on the pockets of ordinary Americans. After all, higher tariffs mean higher prices for everything, from electronics to clothing. And, as Cuban rightly points out, this hits the most vulnerable segments of the population, families who are already barely making ends meet. The administration is in a panic, but that's not all. Businesses are also groaning under the weight of the new rules, because many of them depend on imported materials and products to remain competitive. Cuban is tearing to shreds Trump's claims that this policy supposedly punishes China. In his opinion, it ultimately punishes the Americans themselves. What a brilliant plan. Friends, let's be honest. Why should anyone in their right mind vote for Donald Trump as a business candidate? Just imagine. You're the CEO of a huge corporation like John Deere, and suddenly, out of the blue, you get a 200% tariff. Or you're Carrier Air, and you're being blackmailed because of the relocation of jobs. This is a political circus, not economic management. Business needs stability like air. Large companies spend years building strategies, and small businesses just crave opportunities. But Trump, according to Cuban, creates chaos in world markets. His tariffs aren't just a shot in the foot, they're a torpedo aimed at international trade. Countries retaliate with blows, business panics, and uncertainty stifles economic growth. And how about this twist? America's reputation as a reliable partner is going to hell. Cuban is furious that Trump's decisions lack any foresight. This isn't a strategy. It's pure politicking. Tariffs may make headlines, but they don't solve the underlying problems: intellectual property theft, unfair trade. The administration panics and grabs the first available solution instead of planning carefully and acting strategically. Friends, are we going to allow such short-sighted decisions to continue to destroy our economy? Friends, just look at what's happening. Mark Cuban, not mincing words, is tearing Donald Trump's economic policy to shreds. It's not just about dry numbers and boring percentages, but about the most sacred thing: trust in the country's economy. Cuban, like a voice crying in the wilderness, argues that Trump's decisions undermine this trust, and it's the cornerstone for investment and business prosperity. He dubbed Trump's policy nothing less than reckless, warning of the dangerous precedent it sets. And how about this twist? While the economy is already cracking at the seams, Cuban's criticism raises the question sharply. Is this trade policy salvation or doom for the country? And this, friends, is just the beginning of the political circus. Cuban doesn't intend to back down. He shouts at the top of his voice. Bad trade decisions are a blow not only to business, but to each of us. Soon we will change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the American Gulf, and we will return the name of the great President William McKinley to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. But that's not all. Cuban's criticism isn't just an analysis of economic strategies. It's a deep concern, my friends. He doesn't hesitate to question Trump's intelligence and his ability to make informed decisions. The administration is probably in a panic. Cuban makes it clear that Trump, in his opinion, doesn't understand the complexity of leadership. Running a country isn't the same as running a business, he says, and even in business, frankly, Trump's track record raises serious questions. Numerous bankruptcies in his career, according to Cuban, are clear evidence that Trump's decision-making isn't as smooth as he tries to make it out to be. Friends, just look at the passions swirling around Donald Trump's personality. But Cuban seems to be concerned not only about the business magnate's past, but also about his methods of governing the country. According to Cuban, Trump, like a brave cowboy, relies on intuition rather than the wisdom of experts. Just imagine what this could lead to. Cuban argues that this tactic leads to ill-considered decisions, like shots fired blindly. As an example, he cites Trump's trade policy, which he tears to shreds, calling it short-sighted and destructive. And how about this twist? Let's recall 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. Oil prices collapsed, and that's when the political circus began. Russia and Saudi Arabia staged a price war, and oilmen ran to Trump with a plea: get MBS and Putin together, persuade them to cut production so that prices soar. And here a dilemma arises. Save the oil companies or help people suffering from the pandemic by lowering gas prices? Trump chose the former, and what happened? Oil prices soared to the sky, like a rocket. But that was just the beginning of inflation, my friends. Trump urged to drill, and drill again to lower prices. But, as it turned out, his actions led to the opposite effect. By the time he left the White House, oil prices were sky-high, transportation costs had risen, and all of this, like a snowball, affected the economy. The administration is in a panic. Folks, what a twist! Friends, just look at the political circus unfolding before our eyes. Mark Cuban, not mincing words, is tearing to shreds Trump's understanding of world politics. According to him, Trump's approach to international relations is nothing more than a sideshow of personal grievances masquerading as strategy. And how about this twist? Instead of strengthening America's position on the world stage, we see it isolating itself, like an offended child in the corner of a sandbox. Cuban hits the nail on the head, criticizing Trump's manic desire to reject any criticism. The administration seems to be in a panic because instead of working on real problems, we see a stubborn unwillingness to grow and adapt. Just remember this passage about the state of emergency on the border and millions of criminal aliens. It sounds like a script for a science fiction film, not a balanced political strategy. But most importantly, friends, is that Cuban emphasizes, intelligence isn't just memorized books. A true leader must possess humility, the ability to listen, and see the long-term perspective. It's in these qualities, according to Cuban, that Trump suffers a crushing defeat. His decisions aren't a sincere desire to solve problems, but rather cheap self-promotion designed to please his excessive ego. Well, friends, are you ready to continue watching this farce? Or is it time to demand greater responsibility and competence from politicians? Friends, just think about it. Cuban's words aren't just phrases thrown to the wind. His criticism of Trump, like a thunderclap, is based on an ironclad conviction. Leaders, like beacons, must be wiser, more far-sighted, and, like sponges, absorb lessons from their own mistakes. For Cuban, Trump's approach isn't just an unfortunate mistake. It's a real danger, like an approaching storm. And here Trump triumphantly enters his new term, and Cuban's fears don't just not fade away, but flare up with renewed vigor. He, like a fearless gladiator in the arena of the political circus, throws in the face of the establishment uncomfortable, like a lump in the throat, questions. On what, tell me for mercy's sake, is this leadership built? On a mighty intellect? Or is it just a carefully staged performance for naive viewers? And how about this twist, friends?